Yeah, so it is 10:32. Let's call this meeting to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Thing. Rob Pierce,
Present.
Marilyn Kramer, here, and Terry Rohrmeyer, here. No one here.
All right, good. All right, if you guys will join us, let's salute the flag. All right, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, so I assume everybody's looked at the agenda. Can we get an approval for the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda. Second.
Second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Do we have any public comment?
We have none.
All right, so the business of the day. Discussion and possible direction for staff regarding regional coordination policies on the 2024 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan and implementation and possible modification of these policies and or considerations of a new regional coordination policy.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Pierce. This is Jeremy Smith. For the record, I'm just going to check and make sure folks online. Rob, can you see the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, sorry to interrupt, Jeremy.
Yes.
Can you let me in the side door, please?
Oh, yeah. Joe will come get you. I think there must be the snow may have created a problem with the access. Sorry about that, Jessica. We'll keep an eye open for public that want to come in. Okay, thank you. So
Sorry.
Jessica, no worries.
Apologize.
Welcome. So yeah, we have one item today, and happy to be taking a look at regional coordination, how we do it, and I think you guys know, and we all share this thought that we're dedicated to continuous improvement and doing a better job whenever we can, and we have made some strides, but like I say, we can always find ways to do better. So I think that's what we want to try to focus on generally as we have this conversation. But figured we would start by kind of indicating where we are right now, and that could give us a kind of a starting off point for where we think we want to go. So next slide. Okay, great. So regional coordination, or I think it's actually termed intergovernmental coordination, is specifically referenced in our Nevada revised statutes that control the regional plan and the contents of the regional plan. That's 278-0274. And so we have an approach that is both formal through our regional planning sort of case process and conformance reviews and everything that's required to be policy of the plan, but we also have informal coordination that occurs across a range of entities. And so I've got three columns there. At the bottom, the jurisdictions and affected entities are those organizations that are specifically indicated in the state law as subject to a conformance review with the regional plan for their master plans and their facilities plans. They also have a responsibility to provide annual reporting function to regional planning to indicate how the jurisdiction or affected entity policies and goals and progress during the year have helped promote the region. So that's, again, Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County, the jurisdictions, and our affected entities of the Western Regional Water Commission, Regional Transportation Commission, the Airport Authority, Public Health, Northern Nevada Public Health School District, and the RSTVA, the Visitors Authority. But we, through the years, have there's more going on than just that, right? That's what the state law indicates, but we know that there's so many more connections that exist and need to be reinforced and built. And so we've, over the years, worked with the Economic Development Authority, the Reno Housing Authority, neighboring counties, federal agencies, state entities, fire districts, local nonprofits, certainly the tribes. And we are working in that direction. I think you guys are aware that we're looking, hopefully later this summer, to have a one-day inaugural and broader region summit where we pick some topics that are top of mind in terms of regional planning, and we bring together, cast a wide net to our neighbor counties, to our federal partners, state partners and tribes, and try to bring everybody together to align the thought process and hear what folks have to say, and let that come back and influence how we do our job here at regional planning. So this is kind of just a take on that. We really are trying to communicate and work with not just those folks and agencies that are indicated in the law, but everyone, all the entities that can help us foster what we're trying to do here at regional. Okay, so let's talk about the regional plan. That's our main document that helps guide all this stuff. And it really acts as certainly the formal conduit for regional coordination, but also captures many of the ideas that we bring forth in those informal conversations and coordinations as well. And ultimately, it's a vision document, and it helps align the vision and goals of the local jurisdiction master plans and the affected entity facilities plans. So it's guiding the planning. It's not necessarily a top-down police force rule set, right? It is a guide, and typically we're working on a graphic that helps illustrate this, but it's not a top-down thing. It's a feedback mechanism where the work done by the jurisdictions and entities informs the master plan or the regional plan, and likewise the work we do informs the master plans. And so we're working together, to create this. In 2019, we took the step to basically do a wholesale rewrite of the regional plan. We wanted to move away from some of the more contentious aspects that were rooted in a settlement agreement after litigation in the 2000s. We wanted to really re-embed ourselves and the plan in what the state law requires. And so to do that, we noticed I think there was an effective mechanism for regional planning, but again, we can do better. And we noticed that we had a few gaps. And so in 2019, and as part of the 2024 update, we have implemented new policies and processes specifically related to better coordination in the region around those topic areas that we're involved in. So some of those, and we did this collectively, right, with our regional plan update working group, the RPC, the RPGB, and all the folks that, wanted to participate. Some of these concepts include the tiers, the regional land designations. That is a new concept that ties into the third bullet down there, the regional TMSA, which previously the TMSA was really divided by jurisdiction. And there were these acre buckets, and it was very prescriptive. And we moved away. We collectively thought that it would be better for regional to approach the development and the pattern and form with a regional lens, not focusing on jurisdiction per se. We always make sure in the data work that we do that we have the ability to cast these statistics and metrics in terms of the jurisdiction boundary. That is never left. But in terms of our approach, generally how we forecast the future, how we go about thinking about housing needs, job needs, or whatever it is, we're thinking regional. So those regional land designations were a significant step in that concept and that idea for our agency and how we work together and really adopt that regional lens. Part of that, which we thought was really a great step forward in terms of giving information to you guys, the decision makers, was our PF1 policy in the Public Facilities and Services section, the region-wide facilities and services standards table. So we've got these 5 domains of infrastructure that NRS I quoted earlier indicates that we should be summarizing, helping to guide, being involved in, reporting on. And that is potable water, wastewater, stormwater / flood control, education or schools, and then transportation. And so I'm sure you'll remember the public infrastructure plan is completely oriented around those 5 key domains. And that is how we synthesize the spending and sort of how we break it up and deal with it. And so we've created this standards table. And what that really did is it kind of, it wasn't like a negative thing, but it forced the issue that in the development review and in the submission of the case to regional planning, the local jurisdiction staff, in concert with their applicant, needed to provide evidence as to how those standards for those 5 infrastructure domains were being met. Before that policy existed, that was much weaker in that sense. And often the answer would be, we have a concurrency management system at jurisdiction, whatever. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And I think you guys, as the decision makers, probably think, Well, okay, I'm sure you can. So therefore, you should probably be able to tell me how you will take care of it. And I think that was the step that, took it from don't worry about it to you don't need to worry about it because look, we're doing this. And that really kind of helps, I think, with the decision making and the understanding around how is a proposed development that triggers a regional process actually going to be implementable, served by infrastructure services. So excited about that. And of course, that led to the public infrastructure plan, which has entailed tremendous meetings and coordination and data gathering and talking with many different organizations around how we accomplish infrastructure planning and implementation in the region. Similarly, we looked at the natural resources aspect. That was something that's in that state law that we had an approach, but it was not necessarily meeting the requirement. It didn't have the teeth. It wasn't mapping the stuff. And I think we've really increased our ability to know about natural resources, to provide information, and to bring some of that information into our reviews. Prior to the natural resources policies and plan, we had the development constraints area. That was a very strict boundary that addressed some natural resources like slopes, slopey areas, flooding, federal lands, bias and hydro type stuff. And it's very strict. It's a constraint. If you can't build in a lake, right? So that's very clear. But that doesn't mean that just because now you're outside the lake, that there isn't some consideration for should you be building on the shore or how far, and what is the softer kind of gradient, the fuzzier stuff that comes from the strict boundary. So we instituted the policy with your help, the natural resource consideration areas. And that's where we go after or bring together information on every case that describes the interactions with stuff like slope, fire risk, flooding, species, habitats, trails, and the like. So that really ties into the other bullet that's mentioned, that the initial review memorandums, or ERMs, as we call them. For whatever reason, for a long time, this agency did not opine with comments at the initial stage. What happens is a jurisdiction receives a request for development or some sort of change, and then that gets accepted and then put onto a development review memo email that goes out to a host of partners to provide comments within an initial period. And those comments can then be utilized by the local jurisdiction planner during their development review to make sure that they're addressing everyone's concerns. Well, the fact that we weren't saying anything meant that when we did have a concern, it only came up at the very end of the process. And while that still may be appropriate because the concern is legitimate, it's not a particularly efficient way to do it. And it will certainly not a way to do it that gives people fair warning and allows them to address the thing during the process. So we changed that tack, and now we provide a robust initial review memo at the beginning. As soon as we recognize on those DRMs that something has been submitted that's going to trigger our regional process, right away we say, we think these are the policies that are going to be triggered. And, these are our concerns. And, oh, by the way, we see this interaction. Please reach out to this group and provide comments, or we'll help you get comments from that group, or whatever it takes. And further, our natural resource consideration areas are at that moment reviewed with an overlay process in the GIS, and provided those interactions with the NR layers that we've selected are provided at the time of the initial review, so that it's not a surprise at the end if there's some interaction that we have concerns. So those bullets are some of the ways that we think that we have helped increase transparency, increase how we work together, how we approach the regional cases, and really coordinate on what we're trying to achieve as a region. Next slide. Okay, so I don't want to go through too much detail on all of these. I'm going to do a quick rundown. And I think you could argue that other policies that aren't listed here also foster regional coordination, but these were big ones that I wanted to make sure we pointed out. We already kind of talked about the top two. So we have a policy that says, hey, TMRPA, do a public infrastructure plan, and we're doing that. And that, again, is a coordination around what have we built as far as infrastructure in those domains, and CIPs, what are we planning to do? Likewise, natural resource planning, we tried to identify topics that were of import and current. I think we have a vehicle there that allows us to fold new topics in as they become important. But we have taken this holistic approach with data to natural resource planning. So those both are living documents that are updated annually. And we're constantly looking for ways to make them more accessible and more useful in all these processes. So those live in the public facilities section and the natural resources section of Chapter 3, the regional plan. That's our policy chapter. Then we get to Section 5 of that Chapter 3, which is actually titled Regional Coordination. And so there are a host of policies in that, starting with those letters RC. So number one, the regional planning, you guys on the Regional Planning Commission serve as the board for the approval of local jurisdiction, the two cities, annexation plans. So that policy really works closely with RC2, the spheres of influence, because those annexation plans are typically 7-year plans that are mapped and planned inside the 20-year sphere of influence boundary that has been identified. Now, we want to do some work. I think it's some low-hanging fruit for this discussion is we want to do some work around those sphere of influence areas against our data tracking growth potential and try to cast some timeframes on what we think is actually out there, not as a, policing action, but as an understanding approach to say, okay, the sphere is X size, that's this much growth. Is it 20 years? Is it 40 years? What are we looking at? And then I think we can circle back once we have that to how we then approach annexations. RC 3 and 4, joint planning areas and cooperative plans. I'm just going to skip those because we have a slide all about them, and I'm going to go into detail on those, so we'll move on. I talked about the IRN, that's RC 5. RC 6 defines what we do in terms of projects of regional significance. So typically our case are oriented around master plan changes. That's really kind of our, bread and butter, if you want, the main bulk of what we do. But there are other factors. If you are putting in a new landfill, let's say you're adjusting the boundaries of the Truckee River or one of its tributaries, or you're triggering one of those thresholds that we know about that come from state law in terms of number of units being proposed or water use, wastewater, any of that. We have the resolution of the RPC that defines the project of regional significance. And so whenever that's triggered, we also add that into our conformance review process. Okay, and then RC7 and RC8 deal with annual reporting. For a long time, this is a state law requirement, RC7, that local governments and affected entities need to provide that annual report. Well, they've always done it, and we've always worked, but as often can happen when certain things get compiled, they don't necessarily get utilized or showcased, and you wonder, is this busy work? Why is it sitting on a shelf? What are we doing? And so we recognized that during 2019, and we wanted to make sure that we were highlighting the work that's being done by our partners. So in combination with RC8, we tasked ourselves as staff to create regional statistics reported annually that are related to our policies and what we do. But further, we wanted to make sure that those annual reports from the jurisdictions were more accessible. So we do a summary of the report and provide website access to each report. So we think we've improved that, but again, I think there's always room for improvement. So, but definitely, I think big push in 2019 to enhance the usefulness of the annual reporting process. RC9 and RC10 both refer to findings for different decision types. So if you're doing a master plan amendment review or a project of regional significance review, it's RC9. And what it's really saying is there is that, hey, all of the policies in these 5 sections of the regional plan should be utilized or may be appropriate and can be utilized as the findings for a project. RC10 is specifically about regional plan amendment findings. They're very similar. They're not exactly the same. And I believe they're in the state law to some degree. But the point is that they were already ensconced with a certain set of findings, and we wanted to mirror that. It's not exactly what we do in RC9, but it has the same general effect. But they are different. RC11, we are empowered to convene committees. We're doing it right now. Here we are in a subcommittee. This is exciting. Federal lands disposal legislation. We have coordinated with the feds and the local jurisdictions on the footprint, interactions with slope. We've provided data. We've commented about plans. the idea here being that while the federal lands disposal process is a separate track from regional planning, the resultant disposal will need to then move forward once it becomes private land if you want to develop it through the apparatus of the regional. And so let's make sure that we're at the table talking with these folks that are doing the land bill work as it's happening so that we don't set up a paradigm that where that doesn't fit. So we've done that. My understanding is right now the lands disposal legislation is sort of in a holding pattern, but I imagine it will come back. In 2024, we added the tribal coordination policy. We already were coordinating with tribes, but we wanted to memorialize it in the plan and basically hold ourselves to a higher standard to work with our tribal government partners. So we've been doing that. And finally, we utilize online and digital tools. I think we're really trying to leverage digital data, maps, and everything we can do online to help the coordination piece, to make sure everybody has access. We're seeing the same information. I mean, one of the things we really pride ourselves on is building understanding through evidence and facts and aligning people, right? So that there's plenty of things to debate about, plenty of differences of opinion, but let's not have differences of opinion about reality of the facts of the matter. So the degree that we can utilize these digital products to help us get there, that's what we try to do. So those are the formal policies in the regional coordination section, and those other two I mentioned. Let's circle back to these mechanisms because these are things that already exist. These are policies that already exist in the regional plan, have been utilized in the past, but are currently not being utilized, and potentially have some, emphasis here we could use for this conversation. We can maybe select some of this. So RC3 and RC4, joint planning and cooperative planning. Kind of just in a nutshell, joint planning is the very formal process defined in state law, specific requirements such as creating an actual formal joint plan that's approved by both jurisdiction governing bodies. When you make decisions to amend such a plan, you have to bring together both jurisdiction bodies to make that vote. It is certainly can be appropriate. In the past, there was a joint plan that had been set up in the Reno-Stead TOD corridor, basically, that contained areas of unincorporated Washoe County, as well as incorporated city of Reno. And through that process, it was such a mix that the two jurisdictions got together. They invented specific zoning types and designations for that joint plan area. And they worked together through that mechanism to basically assess and review and approve or deny any changes. So that went on for a while. I think what we learned from what we hear from staff, because I don't think any of us really were here to help administer that, is that it was fairly onerous. And during 2019, the update of the regional plan was a very clear message from staff that they had done that work, that the joint plan had succeeded and been largely built, and that it was time to sunset the joint plan because it was a mechanism that at that point had become a bit overbearing given it was no longer a big vacant tranche, it had to some degree to build that. So we actually sunsetted the joint plan for the Reno-Stead corridor joint plan, I think it's called, in 2019. Now, cooperative planning is a softer approach. It is, and if you read our policy, it's very open. I think there's a lot of things that we could imagine, and possibly with even a policy edit to help guide it a bit. But it gives the power to us as staff and you guys as the decision makers, I think, to work together to create systems to enhance our coordination on these planning cases that work for us, right? That are not predefined in state law. Obviously there are times when joint plan should be the mechanism. Maybe with that lands bill, as we move out into new frontiers of Washoe County, that could be a reason to form up a formal joint plan. But in terms of what we recently dealt with up in Cold Springs, possibly something like a cooperative planning overlay could be a softer mechanism that helps us, enhance the coordination that would happen between the city of Reno and Washoe County for developments going on out there. Now, I will say we have heard from staff that the way that cooperative planning has been implemented in the past is very difficult, cumbersome, and I don't think we want to do it the way that we've done it previously. I think we want to work together to find mechanisms that actually achieve our goals, right? And that don't send ourselves or local jurisdiction staff down a rabbit hole of work that doesn't fit into our existing processes, that there's everyone's time constrained. We get a lot of pushback from staff often regarding trying to add things. And so the degree to which we can achieve our goals, but also keep it efficient, should be top of mind. And as we move towards maybe implementing something like cooperative planning, you're going to hear that again and again from me. But that doesn't mean that we're satisfied with exactly how everything's going right now, that we need to just mimic that. So I think these two mechanisms both have a spatial component. We can put a boundary. In fact, we have a map already pre-gamed for the regional plan, but currently we don't have any of these areas, so that map does not exist. But if we were to establish one, that would become a formalized map in the regional plan, and it would always be there. And there would be opportunities there. And I think that's part of our discussion. What do we want to do inside these areas we define? Let's go to the next one, please. So those are kind of formal policies that already exist. We don't necessarily have to edit or craft new policies to enhance our coordination. There's probably other options that are available to us as well. So one of the things we do is we do the Regional Plan Update Working Group. That's the RPUWG. That is the wrong acronym, but that's okay. Regional Plan Update Working Group is comprised of our local jurisdictions and affected entity staff, planning staff. We come together typically in advance of leading up to a regional plan update, but possibly we need to enhance the number of times we meet and keep that a regular thing. And even when we're not updating the plan, just to keep us on track. And of course, I think the jurisdictions have leeway and their own destiny in terms of how they want to try to do a better job of talking to each other. We're working on this next thing, which I think is going to be really cool. And I've wanted it for a long time. And we're going to get there. And that is a regional case dashboard. So you can go onto our website, you can get a map of all the cases that we've looked at and that are coming forward. So we would have stuff like all the cases that happened in 2025. They're still mapped and they're available. And here's the decision and links to the materials. We'll have cases that are active that we've received and are working on or coming to a forthcoming Regional Planning Commission meeting. That'll be on the map. And further, we'll have our initial review memo cases mapped in there too. So you can even see what's coming down the pike. And so I feel like that's a really helpful coordination piece that we're going to just do, and maybe we can set an example for how that could be done to local jurisdictions as well. Possibly help them. I know they have their own ways of doing things, but set that example and try to get more transparency for everybody in terms of what cases we're all working on. Then we can start to look at interactions too. So that's a really cool thing we're working towards. And then we're always trying to, as I kind of referenced earlier, get as much information and comments and insight at the beginning of the process. And I will tell you, in talking with staff, they have concerns because the timing through which these applications need to be processed through the jurisdictions, it's quick. It's not, 60 days may sound like a long time, but when you start having to do all the things that these folks have to do, it's not that long of a time. And I don't honestly know exactly all the time frames, and I think that's something that we need to do as part of the research on this topic area. But there are still going to be ways, I think, that we can enhance the initial commenting process to put on their radar these coordination concerns as early as possible, so that it's not after the fact that we're upset that X, Y, or Z did or did not happen. We've identified it here, and then if it doesn't happen, you can ask, well, why? Because we talked about it. So, or what's the answer? So those are some other ideas that we had. And finally, I just want to kind of come back to this. I think two things here. Number one, there are constraints on time and staff capacity, right? When we have to recognize that as part of this, and I think it's always going to be there. I'm not saying it as a cop-out. I'm just saying we got to recognize it as we try to improve it and make that better. And then there's also the idea that regional can play a role, even if we're not formally triggered So obviously, we're going to do everything that we said in all that big table if it's our case. But if it's not our case, maybe it was our case and now we're seeing the development realized. That doesn't mean that there's not a role for us to play in terms of helping to broker the conversation, to provide information, and get our opinion involved. And just make sure people are coming together in areas like if we were to identify a cooperative planning area, that area would exist in the regional plan. Whatever mechanisms we come up with would operate absent the need for a regional planning conformance review, potentially, but it would foster better communication between the jurisdictions in that area, as an example. So I don't know exactly how that will go, but I think that there are opportunities for us to be involved that are outside of our formal process. And then finally, I think research for us, for all of us collectively, but probably mostly for Nate. I'm just kidding. In what ways are the jurisdictions already coordinating outside regional planning apparatus at all? Like, we don't do public safety, but clearly there is coordination around fire response and police response. I've heard that there are buffer zones at the edges of jurisdictions that prompt automatically at the jurisdictions communications that are beyond what typically would happen if it was more on the interior of the jurisdiction. I don't have the specifics, but I know that I can be told them very quickly. So I think thinking about what other aspects already exist and identifying them, and then maybe there's a role for us to play in those aspects that are already occurring, or at least be aware of them, and we can point to that, as part of the work we do. So with that, I think we can take the presentation now. I have a motion, which is basically a blank screen. You can provide any motion to me if you really want this, but those are our thoughts initially to set the stage on where we're at and some ideas on how to move forward. But I think at this point, I'd be really open to hearing from subcommittee members on any questions about that and any ideas that you have. Thank you.
Jeremy, thank you. That was an amazing presentation. Hey, can we get it pulled up again and go back 3 slides? There was one of them I didn't get a copy of. I want to look at it.
Excuse me.
Yeah, so back up. That one. That's
This one. You got it. Okay.
Wait, go one more ahead. Forward to the right.
The other one, that one?
Yeah, that one. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm done. All right. Yeah. Hey, that was amazing. Thank you for that information. That was great education. I did not realize you guys only had 60 days from the time that it's been submitted until we have to see it. Is that correct? Am I
That's correct.
Correctly?
Yes.
That's a tight timeline. Who controls that timeline?
60 days from when it's approved at the local. It's Jessica Prenti for the record, legal counsel. The 60-day time frame basically runs upon determination of this completeness of the submission. So if regional planning receives something and they say, well, we're missing XYZ, they go back to the local, say, you need to provide us that. And once there's a completion of the materials determination, then that's when the 60 days starts. It can be extended, it has been extended in the past with consent of the local jurisdiction. Otherwise, we have regional approval deemed to have occurred by operation of law if regional misses that 60-day timeline.
Okay, so after everything is submitted, then the 60-day clock starts. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And that's not in statute, but that's how it's been implemented in the history of the organization. And we've never had pushback from local jurisdictions or affected entities in that regard, because for regional to do its analysis, they have to have everything in front of it. And I know that there's been times when you've had to go back and we've been pushing up against the 60 days and with potentially contentious items. And even in that type of scenario, the local jurisdictions have not tried to say, no, as soon as we gave you the first initial piece of materials on this item, that's when the 60 days start. We've never had that argument made.
Okay.
And our average is around 40 to 45 days, I think, or even less. Even less. The guests are telling me even less. So we get it done as quick as we can.
Okay. Okay. You can take the slide down so I can see your wonderful faces if you want. There we go. Thank you.
So is that 60 days following the final approval of local government?
Yes, so they have their own timeframes, which also include a 50 days thing too. So when the final decision is done at the local, then maybe a day or two later, they'll submit the materials to us.
So
And
it's
then-
120.
The total process, yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or concerns on what Jeremy just talked about?
Marilyn Kramer for the record. The cooperative plan is looking at each jurisdiction, whether that's up to Sparks or Washoe County or the city of Reno, and are we not already doing that anyways? I mean, to a certain extent, isn't there, I mean, they still have to submit to us that they've talked to Sparks or Washoe County or Reno, depending on where this particular development or master plan amendment is.
Yes.
And but
So there are, I don't think there's,
they comment on that. The
That's correct.
cities or the jurisdictions comment on that and say, no, we don't have an issue with this. Here it is. This is what this, and you get those. Am I correct on that? We get it.
absolutely correct,
So
yeah.
that's part of the process. So it's not as though we are ignoring it. It might be that we want to enhance it a little bit more.
That's right.
What they are submitting.
Yes, each jurisdiction is already asking the other jurisdictions and their affected entities and other groups of interest like us to provide comments in the initial period. Absolutely. And that's happening too.
Okay.
And
It doesn't happen everywhere though. Let's be honest. It happens. Washoe County does a pretty good job when there's a project that's in the areas that would be old cooperative planning boundaries. Reno does not. For example, you used to have to go to the NAB and the CAB if you were in a cooperative area.
Mhm.
That is no longer required. In fact, there's no reaching out. And that was the problem with Stonegate. You have this island of Reno that was surrounded by Washoe County, and cooperative planning was not invoked in any way. So there was a lot of community input that basically from the CAB side was never heard. So I don't think cooperative planning, it's really on the primary jurisdiction to implement it. Some are just better than others, but maybe regional has the opportunity to encourage.
yeah, absolutely. So in terms of cooperative planning in a general sense, I think it's happening with, not necessarily to the degree that there's some gaps, right? But that is not what we're talking about when we say cooperative planning. Our policy, currently we have no boundaries defining cooperative planning areas. And I think that's an opportunity that this process we're engaged in now could bring us to. And the reason is what I mentioned with regard to the cumbersome nature of how cooperative planning had been implemented in the past. It did have those requirements. It was part of the settlement agreement, regional planning during the litigation of the 2000s. And it had to get worked all the way down, as I understand it, into the ordinance level of the cities and county. And I mean, I'm sure there was some success there that occurred, right? And I think that we have an opportunity now to learn from that and develop a mechanism for cooperative planning that regional enforces as a regional plan map in an area. Get some mechanisms that are associated to that. I don't know that we have to go down into the ordinance again to make those happen, but possibly it does.
Jessica Prunty for the record. I reviewed the history. I was not part of the team in 2002 and 2007 when there's two settlement agreements that were reached, actually 2002 and 2005. The litigation that was sparked was after the adoption of the 2002 regional plan. And Washoe County, Sun Valley General Improvement District, there was also some private party litigation and then regional in the mix. And so what you ended up with was a very formalized settlement agreement requiring the local jurisdictions all the way down to adoption of ordinances for designated cooperative planning areas. And I will just say from a legal perspective, one, those settlement agreements expired on their own terms. Two, they were a result of litigation, which is not necessarily meaning it was long-term strategically thought out. Right? It was a way to put an end to the litigation at the time at the Supreme Court level. And so the agreements were brokered, everyone bent a knee and created this cooperative planning, various areas, and then requirements, including dispute resolution regulations that are still living in the governing board regulations on procedure to how to mediate any disputes between private parties, local jurisdiction, effectively any disputes within a joint planning area or designated cooperative planning area. I don't think those dispute resolution mechanisms might have been utilized a little bit, and they still sit in the regulations on procedure to avoid going to court again, right? It was pretty clear, like, we don't want to see you guys in front of us again, Justice Hartstein. No. To Jeremy's point, cooperative planning is a term of art. So we want people to cooperate in their planning efforts. And that, I think, is what Carrie's point is some jurisdictions might do that better than others. I don't know if there is a requirement for the reach out and conferring with a neighboring jurisdiction embedded in law. I know that that's part of your initial review memo that TMRPA sets out saying you should go talk to these guys, but it's not an actual requirement. And so maybe if you are interested, if the body's interested in making a recommendation to the planning commission as a whole, like, let's look at designating cooperative planning area, and then what do we expect to happen?
Yeah.
Right.
What are people going to do?
What do they have to produce to
Yeah.
bring back to regional planning that says we did this and we did not have, and there were no issues between the entities.
Exactly.
And that's what I find happened at Stonegate. Reno thought the county thought Reno should have. Nobody did. And it was like, why should we?
I think it was very informal.
And it was like very informal, and there was nothing set in quote stone, so to speak, to say, yeah, we did it, and they don't have any issues with it. So I agree with you on that. I think that we need to have a mechanism put forth that says, yes, these boxes were checked, and these are the things that we did. And if there is no time limit set in mandate that has to be 65 days, if it's 67 days, or we move it out to 70 days, to give the jurisdictions time to do that, then we're not going to have any, the issues aren't going to be as pronounced as they were with Stonegate. I believe the jurisdictions, because everybody is short on staff at this point. Nobody has the staff. I mean, you have 3 people working for you. I mean, how's that work? I mean, you got 65 days, and you may, development may be booming.
Yeah.
Eventually. And how are we going to be able to meet those self-imposed timelines that we've put on ourselves? So if we have a living document, and it can change with whatever is going on, with how it's going on. Do we make those changes and say, yes, let's do this? These are the things this is required. This is optional. We'd like to have the optional as well. But you are required to provide us with X, Y, and Z in order for us to move forward.
And as part of any depending on where this goes, and of course, please keep in mind, anything that the policy adoption, map adoption, designation of cooperative planning area will ultimately need to be approved and adopted by the governing board. So Jeremy made the point, we need to make sure, you guys need to make sure as the decision makers and recommenders, actually, what's actually going to get it across the finish.
Right.
So maybe baby steps.
What's
I have another example that I recall in the past where with development out in Spanish Springs, by Washoe County proposed development, reach out to City of Sparks, the City of Sparks would say, hey, sorry, no sewer capacity. That's our comment. We can't consent to this. And so that's another example, I think, of one that we've seen fairly commonly. It was about 3 or 4 years ago.
And we got in kind of, I mean, that particular case behind the scenes and brokered a conversation between the two public works, the two entities. And, they worked it out. And they're now in a very good position on that.
Yeah. So even though there was no formal mechanism for that to happen, it occurred and it was productive.
Yes.
So.
But I think I agree that it does happen to a degree. They do request there is interaction even on Stonegate, but given the mix out there and the potential incompatibilities or opportunities to foster compatibility, there could have been more that was done, more communication, some set of additional requirements, not some onerous set of requirements per se, but something that, like you said, go to both bodies' community meetings. That could be a requirement that we impose as part of the agreed upon cooperative planning area, maybe possibly.
So I think the meaningful engagement of the community is really important. And that the NATs and the CABs are really there, a venue for that. And so that both should be engaged. And sometimes calendars just don't work. CABs don't meet, NABs don't meet. So Shandon snaps for a while, some back, whatever it is. But that planning step should have a cumulative effects or cumulative impacts analysis of the staff report and where the cooperative mapping exists. And I'm using North Virginia Street as an example because that corridor of North Virginia transformed from sort of lower income and mixed housing that belonged to Washoe County, still does belong, is in the jurisdiction of Washoe County. Time and again, they were presented with manufacturing warehouse, thus transforming the entire backyards of those individuals who felt completely powerless and turned into what I consider a Reno social justice issue. And so had there been cooperative planning on that corridor, because it happened, that transformation happened after the settlement expired, those kinds of things could have been handled in a more cumulative impact, more mitigated fashion. So that would be the planning staff ask, but then also the community engagement piece.
That was an unincorporated Washoe County.
But North Virginia Street wasn't.
Yes, it was.
That was Reno.
I was sworn it was.
No, that was Reno, all those warehouses. But they abutted Washoe County, the homes behind them were Washoe County.
And there is a mix. I mean, I think one of the things that helps this conversation, and I wish I had it right now, and we're working on making it easier, is just be able to pull the map right up and start looking at it and putting the boundaries on it. And so that's another goal that we have generally, is to have easier access to that information at our fingertips. We have the few staff you mentioned. We do everything, but we are making great progress on that. And so I think our ability to bring the data forward in the cases at a more granular, detailed level is going to increase as well. So that will be helpful, I think, in sort of, again, providing that factual basis. And then, of course, there's certainly room to discuss and debate about our approach of what we do there. And I love this idea of fostering the community engagement aspect of the planning review through this cooperative planning mechanism. Because
By the local jurisdiction.
by the local jurisdiction,
Not by regional.
we don't want to run
Right.
into. We would, and that's a thing that we struggled with when we came up with it. There is a role for regional outside our formal review case. If we established in the regional plan a cooperative planning area, we don't necessarily have to go administer every single meeting that occurs in that area. but we want to hear a report, say like in an annual report, of how it was done. And make sure it's happening, and be there obviously as a support mechanism to facilitate. But I don't, yeah, I agree. I don't think that we have the capacity to broker that. As we move forward, let's just take Stonegate and Cold Springs as the example again. As we move forward, now that our formal process is done, what is our role as developments are proposed and permitted or come forward in that area from Reno? What is the mechanism? If we were to, and this is just an example, I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but if we were to put an overlay of a cooperative plan on the Cold Springs Hydro Basin and add a couple of requirements as you guys have discussed, then our role would be to make sure that those things are happening as those things come.
If a particular project.
Yes.
Or there's a master plan amendment in that cooperative planning area, it come to regional for review.
Well,
And you would look to see what happened before.
yes, I'm saying that we would help. If we're going to establish a boundary in the regional plan that asks the jurisdictions to do something that's outside of our process, we're going to need some window into whether they're doing it or not. And some way to ensure that it's happening, or what's the point of it. So I think that's where we're struggling. I don't know that I have the answers, but that's the kind of thing I think we want to try to solve with this subcommittee in these discussions. How do we affect positive change towards regional collaboration and coordination outside of our formal process that is our case review, which obviously I went through all that. We're doing that, but there, and of course, let's not forget, to your point, Marilyn, that there are gaps, but there is communication between the jurisdictions, and I think we want to research and find out more accuracy in our reporting to you about how that's happening outside of our process as well. Let's really identify where these gaps are. I think there are gaps, and what we can or cannot do to try to fill them.
Yeah, no, I think that that is a good course of action. Yeah, because Stonegate, since the name got brought up, had a lot of community feedback that was very negative on that. People were not feeling like they were validated with their remarks, and a lot of people feel that Reno, although you're right, they are not required to look at Washoe County's master plan, that these people moved into the county because of the Washoe County master plan, and because there was a little pocket of Reno in there, that Reno got to do whatever they wanted to do without coordinating or even looking at Washoe County's master plan. And it has created some issues. And I personally have heard quite a bit about it. So I would really like to go down that path of how do we go forward with things like this. And the other things that I really want to emphasize is we also need to look at police and fire. If a certain project cannot get police and fire support, maybe we need to not recommend approval. Maybe we need to recommend denial on that. And now that I've been paying attention a little bit more to the things, I see that is happening a lot. And it's not just here regional, it's Washoe County also. They're recommending approval for projects that cannot be supported by local law enforcement or fire. In fact, that just happened 2 nights ago. We were at a meeting until 11:15 at night, and the developer could not say, and there was no documentation, that Washoe County Sheriff's Office or the fire department would be able to support this project. And so that to me is a major red flag. I'm all about safety. We have to keep the residents safe. Not just the new project, but all the residents that are around it also. So,
Here. I think it's a really good point. I'm sorry, Mike, I don't want to cut you off. Are you finished?
No, you're good.
Okay. I absolutely hear you. And we have had this question, and we've actually asked in 2019 during the regional plan update, we did bring this concept to the governing board, and we asked about to what degree or should we get some policies and get involved in the police and fire public safety conversation. It's not part of our state statute, but maybe I would defer to our legal counsel on our position there, what we can do.
Jessica Funny for the record, Chair Pierce. I echo Director Smith's sentiments that safety is probably paramount in a lot of our minds. It is not paramount in our regional planning statutes. In fact, police and fire are not listed anywhere in our regional planning statutes. In talking about making the contents of what have to be in our regional plan, there's public facilities and services, but then there's a laundry list of what that encompasses, and it does not include police and fire. That list hasn't been touched since initial adoption, except for adding in schools. So from my perspective, and you've heard me say this many times, the Regional Planning Commission, Regional Planning Governing Board are bodies of specific and limited statutory jurisdiction. And we have to stay in our lane. So we cannot imply that you have jurisdiction greater than that granted in the statutes, which is different than the local jurisdictions, the county and the cities. There's more implied jurisdiction there. With us, that is not the case. So from a legal perspective, I could not recommend going down this road unless there was buy-in from everybody, because it is outside of our statutory regime. And I know, historically speaking, one of the reasons, it's one thing to say, oh, you need a fire station or you need a police station, but it's another thing of how you mandate staffing. And that is purely a creature of local jurisdiction and collective bargaining with those bargaining units for police and fire. And no one knows what the budgets are going to be. And I would bet my last dollar that each and every local jurisdiction would say, no way, regional planning, but out.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be real blunt.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's the sentiment every time this very legitimate concern, very legitimate point. That has to be something that is addressed at the local jurisdictional level in their plans. It's not something that we can require on the regional level from a legal perspective.
Doesn't that open us up to a lawsuit though? Yeah, regional approved this and then somebody gets killed. Aren't we
It wouldn't open us
in a way
up.
liable?
We are not liable, no, because
We
we
approved
do
it?
not have those requirements. We don't have those requirements. What would open us up to a lawsuit is adopting a policy saying about
You have to do it.
police and fire facilities. So it would be like us also telling, even though schools are listed, we can't tell Washoe County School District when they have to build a new school or when they have to decommission a new school.
Well, I get that, but this is a safety. We're talking about safety. Safety.
Well, that's when you have to have assurances that I think each and every local jurisdiction has requirements for police and safety.
Right.
Fire in their local plans and ordinances of like, hey, okay, this development's going to be X number, you have to have a fire station. And that's when we have to respect those jurisdictional boundaries. Otherwise, we're going to be intruding upon the jurisdictional purview of the cities and the county.
Okay, but let's see. Yeah, go ahead.
So that's all I have to say.
Okay. So let's say the Stonegate thing takes off. They build their 12 million square feet of warehousing, and there's a massive fire out there. And they say, well, we don't have the fire department. So all of a sudden the fire spreads over to the county people. And then what? So what I'm saying is, I don't know. I mean, yes, you would know the law. I don't know that part, but I would think that this would be like up there in terms of priority. But I guess maybe I'm looking at it wrong.
For the city of Reno, it should be.
But when they have a little pocket and they're putting stuff in this little pocket that's surrounded by Washoe County, and they don't even look at the Washoe County master plan, or in fact, there was a comment made when I asked the question, did you even look at the Washoe County master plan? And the answer was no. Why would I? That concerns me. That's not regional coordination. It's not. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't have anything else to say. I'm just saying that we have to stay away from police and fire.
Rob, we can't mandate to a jurisdiction that you have to have X amount of police officers and X amount of firefighters to man stations to put in a new development, because those particular items are based on tax revenues. That's the way they support those. Those bargaining units and those two in those two jobs would never allow it. Are you going to have, and fire knows no boundary. They don't care if it's Washington County, Sparks, the city of Reno. Fire does not know boundaries. So out in these other areas, you have mutual aid agreements between the county and the city and BLM and NDF. You have all these other agencies that are going to come. They may not be the response time that you want, but they're going to come. Crime knows no boundary. They don't care if you're in the city of Sparks, the city of Reno, or Washoe County. Does the sheriff have the staff to do it? Or does the city of Reno have the staff to do it? Or does the city of Sparks have the staff to do it? They don't. That's the unfortunate thing. They want to build, but yet they have to figure out how to man these. That's up to the sheriff and the police chiefs and those jurisdictions to figure out how to man those things and provide the response to it. Now, fire in the city of Sparks, you have 8 minutes. If you are not within that 8-minute time frame, you get sprinklers in your house. Period. End of story. That's the way the ordinance works. But police response, the county can go everywhere. The cities can't. We also have another police force within this community, and that's school police. They can go everywhere now too. So we have the tools. What we don't have is the manpower and the revenues to go along with that, to hire all these people to do all these things. And I agree with you. Police and fire are a very big thing. But in order to do that, it takes redoing the property tax structure, and you get that on the ballot and we'll see where it goes. You know, I mean, that's what we're looking at. We can't, as this body, or even as a planning commissioner, I can't say you have to have police and fire. They have a new fire station in Sparks. Good for us. Woohoo. But they also shuttered another fire station. How's that going to benefit the people that got this shuttered fire station? They don't have sprinklers. So it's a give and take. We can't. Those are based on property taxes and revenues that come in. We cannot say you have to have X amount of dollars. It doesn't work like that. That's not how the property taxes are distributed. We can't do that. And it's a wonderful idea. It's a really great idea. And I agree with that. But for us to get into the middle of that would be detrimental to us.
Unless there was legislative action.
Right.
Amended our statutes.
Right.
So we can approve a project even though the fire and police both put a letter out to say we can't support this in its current form. We have to still approve it?
From a regional perspective,
yeah.
Yes, under our criteria and our plan and our statutes. Now, whether that should have been approved at the local level, that's a different question, right? That's a different question. And I want to emphasize that on all levels, there is a remedy to the courts. So with your example, Rob, if you have letters from police and fire telling City of Sparks, there's no way we can serve this, we're completely opposed to this development, don't approve it. City of Sparks go ahead and approves it. Then, police and fire, they can initiate a lawsuit, or the community members can initiate a lawsuit against City of Sparks saying, you should not have done this. This was an abuse of your discretion. This was an arbitrary action. Judge, tell them they can't do that. Because within the City of Sparks code and ordinances, I'm sure there's requirements, just as there is in Washoe County, the City of Reno, for public safety facilities to serve the development, or tell us how it's going to happen. And so that's where the remedy is. And I'm not trying to say it is a cop out for regional. It's just, it's not regional's role, and we don't have the authority to really even take that into account. I know it's a conversation and it does get mentioned, but even at the governing board level and the consideration of the appeal for Stonegate, member Rodriguez, who is very well versed because of his daytime job in fire, had to be educated regarding the legal reality and the limits of regional jurisdiction in hanging your hat, the decision-making hat on those type of considerations. It would be different if Telmore said, we have zero capacity. We cannot serve this development. Then you can say, no.
Does not meet PF1
Yes,
standard,
right.
clearly a finding,
Yes.
we recommend deny.
And that's where I think the focus can go back to the land use, terms of utilities, expanding maybe to energy capacity in the PIP, or climate impacts related to greenhouse gas emissions from, because now we have the urban heat initiative that we can use findings that the utilities can't be met, or the water is not available, or the transportation impacts. And I want to put a flag here that these projects that are coming, I'm only bringing this up because we sat through hours for public testimony. The most I think you said on record for any project.
Yeah.
Is that when you're just getting a straight zoning or a master plan, you're not even getting a planned unit development, there is no scenario that anticipates their future.
Right.
There's no statistical deviation that you can give some certainty in the staff reports. And now how does a planning commissioner make a decision with regional implications on something that could be virtually anything? Industrial zoning allows pretty much everything. It's like the heaviest, longest, loudest, noisiest, smelliest uses. So how can we find ways to encourage more information?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great point. In thinking about the public safety aspect, I think there's a distinction between a finding and context, right? And I don't think that we are prohibited from talking about it, right? And I think that maybe an idea that was coming to my mind as we were talking, for Nate again, is that when if we have, let's say we have a case in a cooperative, we establish a cooperative planning area boundary, we have a case, and while we can't necessarily use the public safety information as one of our findings to say yay or nay, we could certainly upgrade our reporting of the discussion at the local jurisdiction level about public safety so that the awareness is built through our process as well. It would, again, we'd have to, if there's legitimate reasons to say denial. I'm thinking back to the Spanish Springs case that Jessica mentioned. We were ready to say we recommend denial because it was a very clear-cut case of not meeting our policy. I mean, it was very clear, but we took a step in advance of that to say, we're going to basically set up this. We're going to recommend denial unless you fix this. And they fixed it.
They did.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was our approach there. But I do think there's opportunity to enhance our delivery of information around public safety. But we have to be careful because we can't be seen as saying we made a decision based on it. That puts us in a hot water.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe if we can just draw a little bit more attention to it, and so let the public know that, hey, this project is being recommended for approval, but we have XYZ saying we can't support this when XYZ is public safety. You just need to be aware of it. So we're throwing it out there, and then maybe do a disclaimer. We can't deny this based upon that. And if you want that fixed, get your senator involved, or however. I don't know how do you get that fixed?
Through the legislature.
can you somewhere down the line impose something on the developer saying, hey, by the time you get to X amount done on this project, you need to make sure that you have funded the sheriff's office, police, fire department with X amount of dollars towards this project for public safety.
That's
Yeah.
an impact fee. You impose an impact fee.
And that's a
Yeah,
little,
an impact fee.
That's a local issue.
Okay.
It's not a regional issue, it's a local issue. So if you say to a developer, once you have 80% build out and 80% occupancy, you are going to have to pay an impact fee. But the problem with that, Rob, that I see is that impact fee is going to be pushed onto the homeowner as a special assessment district.
Right.
And do they really want that in perpetuity for the life of their loan? I mean, do they want to have to pay that special impact, that special assessment district? I don't know. But that's certainly a way to do it. But that's at the local level you do that. It's not at the regional level. I mean, and that's within the local planning ordinances that has to occur.
Or a development agreement.
Or a development agreement, right.
Or a master plan community, which I'm not super fond of, but I think on those very large scale developments, that kind of thing is necessary to really understand and guide what the future will be. But I think the common problem that we're seeing is how Nevada planning is. It's really the onus and the cost all falls on the consumer because we don't have any other revenue. We're allergic to revenue in our state. I heard that said. It's up to the citizens to sue the city for not having adequate services. That's crazy. That is expensive and arduous and by no means something that will happen. That's keeping the power out of the people's hands. And so I think we have to rethink about planning at every level of flipping the pyramid so that people's voices actually matter. At least in the few years that I've been in the planning commission, I have learned that lesson time and again. So, but that's what I'm seeing in these conflicted projects is that there's no means to give the people's voice any sort of actual value or validation.
Okay.
And then, yeah, they have to get organized and sue. That's not really a meaningful path.
Right. Well, yeah, by the time it happens, it's gonna be years down the road. But okay, sorry about taking us down that little dirt road. I apologize. So how can we, getting back on track here, how can we do some regional coordination where one master plan will complement the other master plan and at least get considered? Like if you're going to put tier 1 land next to tier 3 land in the county, how can we work that out? I mean, because obviously the people that, let's just say, for instance, county's tier 3, Reno's tier 1, and tier 1 wants to put, like downtown Reno on the other one side of the fence, and the other side of the fence is very large lots in the county. In terms of regional coordination, what can we do so that both parties are heard and validated on a transparent matter?
Jeremy, for the record, I think it's a really good question. I would couple of points. The tiering system is a reflection of the 3 master plans. So the actual configuration of the boundaries was based on, and the master plan boundaries that were submitted to us from the local jurisdiction master plan. So those tiers reflect. Now, the master plan for Washoe County has fewer master plan designations and an overall more rural character. I mean, probably semi-rural, I would say, really, in the TMSA. And with the city of Sparks and Reno, there's quite a few more master plan designations, but we did absolutely use the master plan maps to nest the tiers. Also, the tiering was very negotiated during the 2019 update process through the elected official level, staff level, commission level. The first tiering, you should have seen the first tiering map I proposed. It was not necessarily well received. It was based on our understanding at the time of the provision and availability of infrastructure. And it put a lot more of the city of Reno's land into tier 3. And that raised some red flags. And it brought, just honestly, brought the city of Reno more to the table on that concept. And they were very adamant through that negotiation that anywhere in the incorporated city of Reno needs to be tier 2 or higher. And likewise, anywhere in their sphere of influence needed to be tier 2 or higher. Now, I was able to get a little more compromise there because there's this thing called Spring Mountain, which is in the TMSA. It's way out to the north. It's an island with 12,000 units approved through a PUD. We ensured that went into tier 3, even though it's in the Reno sphere because it's so disconnected. But in terms of at that time, there was a reticence by the city of Reno generally to relinquish any control over the future planning condition of their jurisdiction, especially their incorporated boundary, and similar sentiment from the electeds at City of Sparks. And one final point about the tiers that I want to explain is that we believe, and we designed the tiers as a mechanism to allow for change, specifically in Washoe County. Resulted from this settlement that legal counsel described, Washoe County was anywhere in the unincorporated portion of Washoe County was arbitrarily limited to a 5 dwelling unit per acre maximum density period. There was no, and in fact, one time we did recommend denial was because in unincorporated Washoe County, a landowner wanted to do 9 dwelling units per acre, some apartment type things, and the Washoe County Commission approved it. And we recommended a denial, and ultimately it was denied because it did not meet that arbitrary limit that had been set. It was very clear. That was our policy. That was what we'd all agreed to. So, but we didn't necessarily think that was a good idea to have this arbitrary thing because that's not getting at the best case use for a piece of land potentially, right? Generally, I think it registers in terms of what the county is trying to achieve. But what about Sun Valley? We had a very successful tier amendment that went through and it was this case that you're kind of mentioning where it was tier 1 in sort of a 500 or a half-mile buffer of Sun Valley Boulevard, and then it sort of ended. And that was what we came up with when we established the tiers because that's what we thought might be reasonable. We wanted to help support, an area in Washoe County in the unincorporated zone that could support density better. It could have more than 5. The transit was there. The resources were there. The infrastructure was there. And then an affordable housing project came in tier 3, just adjacent to the tier 1 boundary, just adjacent in Sun Valley there. And so the tiering mechanism worked because we were able to make the case based on an understanding of the available infrastructure, the capacity of our systems to accommodate the density was evaluated. And we were able to recommend, we think that for this area, for this project, we can increase the tier and we can increase the density beyond some arbitrary level and achieve some affordable housing. And so it's kind of a huge win. So the tiering mechanism is designed to be the a priori sort of understanding, but with mechanisms to allow ideas to be run up the flagpole if they're supportable through evidence-based analysis, especially around infrastructure. Then we could recommend that potentially a tier change is appropriate. But that was part of that brokered negotiation. We had to put a lot of the unincorporated county into tier 3, I think, to satisfy the concerns of the cities around density proliferation in unincorporated county. And remove that arbitrary thing, but we added, the tier 3 mechanism where you have the existing density is allowed. If you can make a valid case and everyone agrees, then now there is a path to I say run it up the flag. We basically ask for approval based on meeting the criteria.
Okay, so let me throw a scenario out there, and tell me. I don't know. I'm confused. Anyways, no, I've got it. I understand that, but here's a case that's going to happen. In fact, it's happening right now. It's not finalized, but you've got RTS, Reno Stead Airport, tier 1 land. It goes all the way up to a fence. On the other side of that is Washoe County tier 3. If the airport says, oh, we want to do XYZ, build high rises or whatever next to tier 3 large lot community, how do we compromise on that? How do we make both sides feel validated and accommodate both sides? I mean, what's the process for that? Because there's going to be a lot of regional coordination in my mind going on about this. It's going to be a lot of talk.
I think you're right. I think those boundary areas. I mean, I think that's why the cities and county have adopted this communication interaction when cases are near the boundaries. Possibly, we could also adopt such a thing for our cases that come through that are within a certain buffer area of a tier boundary. But that could be a mechanism that we try to employ. I think there is, the evolution of the developed area. And as we go through time, our population grows. Our plan generally supports infill. That means we support increasing density when we have the facilities and services commensurate to meet the requirements of the density. And adjacency to tier 1 is an important criteria for changing tier 2 or tier 3 into something more dense. I think one of the things also that I didn't really want to go into too much detail on because I think it's somewhat contentious, but it's our purview, so we should talk about it. We currently do not have a very forward-looking take on annexations and density expansion because 2 cities have let their annexation plans lapse for almost over 10 years in some cases. So annexations can still occur through an alternate landowner 670 annexation route. But I do think that as we fine-tune our data, and our understanding of the sphere of influence, we do need to take a step forward on the annexation front. And we should be asking questions like areas near, where are you planning to expand, if at all, city of Reno or city of Sparks? And how does that impact existing unincorporated population? To your point of, potentially, I don't think that this is my idea right now, but potentially expanding around that tier 1 airport area and densifying out there, if we have the available infrastructure, could be a good idea for the long-term strategy of our region. I don't know for sure. I'm just saying it's possible. And so I think we need to circle back onto the annexation and sphere conversation as part of this work, definitely. But certainly the mechanism of evaluating cases near a boundary of a tier is a very reasonable improvement we can make in our staff report, in our analysis.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'd like to definitely look at that. Okay. Because going forward, times have changed. It's been quite a few years since a master plan was done. And anyways, things are changing. So they may or may not have the same weight as they did then. So does anybody else? Go ahead.
So I appreciate the tier 1, tier 3 juxtaposition.
Yeah.
Those definitely seem like cooperative planning necessary spaces.
Right.
But what about you have Reno Sparks Indian Colony sitting right in the middle of urban space, so you have all tier 1, but that to me is an area that cooperative planning does not take place. We've heard that. We've had the Indians that our SCI come to Reno and say, you don't really include us. And so that to me also is signals that cooperative planning boundaries should be improved.
Agreed. We recognize that there was a gap, if you will, in coordination with tribal governments. Kind of came to a head with us with an area completely out in the rural area, nothing to do with in town, but a geothermal project in the San Emilio Valley that the Pyramid Lake tribe had strong concerns about, and it was adjacent to their reservation. And you're right that the mechanisms to ensure that coordination and collaboration seem to be missing or absent or underwhelming, if you will. Right. So that is one of the main reasons that led us on this path to our policy for tribal coordination, where we're regularly checking in. The RSIC has recently adopted some new plans for their lands, and we've read those, familiarized ourselves with those, and we're thinking about that. I think what I'm hearing is,
but proponents should maybe go to tribal council or if they have a project within a buffer area.
Well, sure. Or what is the? I don't know that we can enforce that, but certainly let's look at where do we have these potential interactions, and what are sort of criteria that we may be able to suggest, impose, require, whatever the language ends up being. In those, if a project comes forward in those areas, and I think it's a sticky zone if the project doesn't trigger the regional process.
Well, like GSR has to come. Or the arena would have been a project, for example, that would be a PRS that is also would be an adjacent to our IC.
So interestingly, I talked to them about the arena and it didn't seem to trigger the PRS. We never got anything submitted on the arena.
Like the traffic.
Because it's Nate Kuchar for the record.
Thank you for that.
It's because traffic is based on average daily trips, and so because arena has very selective times, they don't typically trigger us. The same thing with the Sparks Amphitheater out there. We did not see that either.
Now, in the past, if you look back at our research on PRS, arenas used of a certain size used to be a PRS threshold.
Mhm.
So that was in, they got taken out. A lot of stuff happened, before any of us worked here too.
Yeah.
But we do know that that was a consideration. So it is valid. It's legitimate what you're saying. And I don't know, currently we don't have a rule to say that's a PRS.
Mhm.
But as we move forward on this discussion, I think it sounds like we're trying to identify obvious interaction areas that should have a deeper level of communication.
Well, the arena and maybe the new soccer facility that was
Which
like
one?
Jones West Ford area.
Jones Westford.
Both of them?
Are
Are we having two?
I'm not sure.
There's the J Resort soccer facility.
Yeah, I was gonna
There's
say, there's at least two.
There's 12 soccer fields going there, but no, the Jones
Right,
West
yeah,
is
the
going
Jones
to be
West one.
redeveloped as an arena.
Yeah.
That would also be very close to ours. I see.
Yeah.
It seems like maybe arenas should be revisited as PRSs. That's a huge traffic generator.
It's a huge traffic generator, periodic.
Periodically. It's like
Right.
Golden Eagle.
Yeah.
Golden Eagle is a huge traffic generator, but only in certain times. I mean, it's not as though it's
That seemed to be the reason it
Continuous.
was taken out, is that it wasn't continuous.
right.
But that was the rationale at the time. That doesn't mean we can't.
Yeah. I mean, there could potentially, that we have a current tribal coordination policy that's very regionally focused. There might be a potential conversation for the decision makers about encouraging local governments and maybe adoption within their master plans of consultation with tribes. We're not going to be able to say the tribes have to talk to you back. Right?
No.
And so, and that was kind of in the scenario that Jeremy mentioned, there was an initial objection by the tribe and then outreach. And then they basically they just kind of, I don't know, if they maybe might have appeared at one meeting.
Yeah, we facilitated when we postponed the item, in fact. And once we found out the significance of the concern, which, we didn't recognize given the current systems of the comment letters, to your point from earlier, sure, they said stuff, but it wasn't top of mind for us as the point at which we should, be engaging on this thing. And I think obviously we had a wake up call, and now we've changed that approach. And we're trying to be more aware of that. And I'm sure there's other places where we're not aware and we should be. And we will try to get it there too. But I'm really I'm obviously a spatial thinker with the GIS background. And I'm thinking about what could we do as part of this process. Let's identify those important sort of interactions. Like maybe it's not crucial to identify tier 1 to tier 2 within the city of Reno. That boundary is okay, you guys can manage it. But to Rob's point, if you're at the north end of the city of Reno boundary and it's tier 1 and it goes to a tier 3, maybe that boundary becomes part of a cooperative planning overlay that has some criteria that make sure that we don't miss things like we did in that Santa Media.
There you go. I like that. Yeah. So what's your time frame on this meeting, Jeremy? We've been going for an hour and a half, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We never really discussed that. How long are these meetings planned for?
Yeah, we don't have to stop. 2 hours is probably a reasonable time limit for this. But I think we understand where we're at. I guess maybe what I would look for at this point would be a motion with a little bit of direction on the you don't have to be super specific, but maybe something like regional planning staff go forth and research the stuff that we talked about today and what mechanisms may be available for us to implement and do some research, right? And bring it back in like March. We have another subcommittee meeting in early March where we report on our results and our findings and our communications with the locals and entities. And maybe we have some more concrete ideas at that time, which then leads this subcommittee body to opine on that. I don't know if that at that point we'll be ready for a recommendation to the larger body, but that's where we're moving. And so maybe you guys could give a motion to direct us to go do that work. We'll do it. We'll bring it back to you in early March. We'll see where we're at there. Either we'll go to the RPC fully after that, or maybe we have one more meeting if there's still some areas to investigate or new ideas. And by the late spring, early summer, we need to be bringing a recommendation for, or at least an update, right, and where we're at to the full regional planning commission, building that buy-in, making sure everyone there has a chance to weigh in. And then we typically try to do policy updates to the regional plan only once a year in the October, December timeframe. That's when we do our housekeeping update. That's when we do our annual reporting stuff starting now, although those timeframes are a little bit weird now. But October is when we accept TMSA amendments. Like October is kind of a hallmark moment when we kind of adopted the 2019 plan. And so it's sort of our thing. So I generally think as a time frame, we've got a few things in the mix. We've got a schools policy that we're working on an edit to that I think, I would love to already have it done, but probably October. We've got energy policy review, which we're ramping up our engagement on. I mean, we've done a lot of work on data centers and research. Now what we want to do is actually propose edits to our policies that keep up with the state of energy right now and what's happening, right? And make sure our policies are targeted towards what we can expect. So we got the schools bit, we got the energy bit, and we've got this. And all three of these things need to be vetted through the Regional Planning Commission body as well, before going to the governing board. And along the way, the governing board needs to be kept apprised and updated as well. So it's all a communication stream, but I think realistically, if we're shooting for October, that's a realistic goal to get an update to the regional plan that encapsulates these kind of three policy approach modifications.
Okay. How is it going to be possible to maybe wrap all this up by June? Isn't that when we do elections? Because
for the
if I'm not the chair anymore, is somebody still going to continue this?
I'll be chair and I'll continue, Rob, I promise.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So that's good. Thank you.
So be part of this committee as the former.
I know. I apologize, everybody. It's just I just want to make sure that that we're doing a cooperative planning. And the goal is to try to get both sides of the fence to feel validated. I'm not trying to stop development, but I'm trying to make it smart development. That's my goal here. And whatever comes out is what comes out of these meetings. But in the end, I want to make sure that both sides of the fence feel validated. And I think that we can do maybe a little bit better job of polishing some of our regional coordination efforts. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I really like the idea of this cooperative planning road that we're talking about here, and I would love to hear what everybody else has to say.
Definitely support a recommendation for cooperative planning in areas where there are tiered incompatibilities, potentially we're at 1 to 3, and in areas where any property abuts or was in some buffer distance to a tribal community or tribal land. And then separate of that, a recommendation, just since the energy work is going forward, just revisiting the PRS trigger for heavy energy consumption, anything over 5 megawatts in addition to the energy generation, the way it currently reads.
I like it. I'll second that.
I'll second that. I'll say yes.
Third it. All those in, okay, we got it. We got a motion. We got a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. All right. I think you guys have some direction now to go
Yes,
on.
thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, I really appreciate you guys doing this. I think we're gonna make some headway, and it's gonna be a good thing for everybody in all the seats of everywhere. So yeah.
I agree.
Do you guys have anything else, Jeremy?
Not on the item. I think with that motion and that vote, I think we're good on item 5A, and we could just kind of quickly finish out 6 through 10, I think, and all good. We probably don't have to do that, but I don't have a report.
Okay.
No reports. Do you have any specific requests for future subcommittee agenda items, like when we come back in March, other than obviously what we talked about?
Or is this
Yeah.
something
Go ahead, Carrie.
this always happened quarterly?
No, this subcommittee was formed back in November, and this is the first meeting, and I'm just suggesting that we'll need that much time before we can come back together and report adequately on the topics.
Yeah. My question is, why are we waiting until March? Is that because it's what it's going to take staff to?
Correct. Yeah, I think
Okay. All right.
given our scope, I mean, we have an approved scope of work with the Regional Planning Governing Board for the fiscal year. This is outside of that. So I think we need to manage it in a way that allows us to complete those tasks that we're on the hook for, really, but also do this. I think this is appropriate. But I think that given what we have coming, I mean, late February or early March, first week of March is kind of what my mind is telling me.
Sounds good.
I said, you guys are only 4 people for crying out loud.
Well, 16.
Just for the record, I would also recommend that there be an item for the governing board, February meeting, to advise them of the subcommittee's meeting, the conversation on a high level, advising, and ask for some feedback, because I would hate for you guys to go down this road and the governing board have zero interest in doing any of these things. So I think it would be helpful to have feedback from them. And that is also consistent with what we've done in the past when we've had subcommittees created of the RPC. The RPGB might want to create a subcommittee as well, a regional coordination subcommittee, and then we might have joint subcommittee meetings. We don't know, but I think they, as basically the head of this organization, needs to be advised and weigh in and give you comments, which I think will help. They bring a different perspective, each and every member of that board, and they might have some very helpful things for the subcommittee's work in March.
I
Okay.
think going on.
I think that's good. Does everybody agree on that?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that, Jeremy, or?
We don't need a motion there. That's just, I can make sure that we do that and that we schedule a meeting for March. I'll get right on that.
Okay. All right.
Great. And then in terms of 8, 9, and 10, we have no public comment, right? We have no written correspondence. And Rob, if you're satisfied, you can adjourn us.
Yeah, it's 12:10. Thank you, everybody. The meeting is adjourned.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You too.
Next